Hello and welcome to Nana's Crafty Home. My name is Tanya. Today's tutorial is going to show you the Alpine crochet stitch. I used this highly textured stitch in one of my new release patterns. It's going to be coming out in a couple of days, the Alpine twist head wrap. And this is a very simple stitch once you get used to it. It is using a front post double crochet, but with a different stitch placement than you might be used to. We're actually going to be dropping down into a previous row, skipping one row, and working that front post double crochet into that previous row. So it gives a little bit of a crunch texture. It kind of crunches your stitches together, and you can see here it gives a little bit of a different appearance to that stitch. For today's tutorial, I am going to be using the same yarn that I used for my head wrap, the Lion Brand Jean yarn. And this jeans yarn comes in many different colors. I'm going to be doing the tutorial in this color here, the khaki. And I'm also going to be using a size I or a 5.5 millimeter crochet hook, and you will also need a stitch marker as well. So let's go ahead and get started. So to get started, we're going to get our yarn on our hook, and I'm going to chain 33. This stitch is worked in any odd number of chains for your foundation chain. So I'm going to begin my sample here with 33 chains. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So for row 1 with 33 chains on my hook, I'm going to double crochet in that third chain from my hook, and my skipped chains are not going to count as a stitch. And then I'm going to work a double crochet in the remaining chains. So in that third chain from the hook, work a double crochet in the next. And this is optional, but this will help you, especially if you've never worked this stitch before. You can put a stitch marker around this second double crochet that I just made, and that will be the stitch that we work around with our front post double crochet in row 3. So just place a stitch marker around that stitch, and that will help keep track of that stitch and make that third row a little bit easier to work. And so then just continue on working a double crochet in every chain to the end. So I've worked a double crochet in every chain. My stitch count would be 31. And for row 2, I'm going to turn my work, chain 1, I'm going to single crochet at the base of that chain 1 in the same stitch, and then I'm going to work one row of single crochets. So one single crochet in every stitch across. So I've completed row 2, working a single crochet in every stitch. I'm going to turn my work, and for row 3, I'm going to chain 2. That chain 2 is not going to count as a stitch. I'm going to double crochet in that first stitch, so the base of that chain 2. Now I'm going to work my first front post double crochet, and I'm going to be working these front post double crochets below the last row of single crochet. So I'm going to be working around the double crochet posts from that first row. And again, remember I talked about placing a stitch marker around that second double crochet made, and that's going to help guide me to know which stitch is my first stitch. So you're going to be working a front post double crochet around this double crochet post that I have marked with my stitch marker, and essentially you're yarning over, you're inserting your hook around that double crochet post. So inserting it from the front, around the back, to the other side, yarning over and pulling up a loop. Yarning over, pulling through 2, yarning over, pulling through 2. So I'm working a regular double crochet stitch, but I'm working it around that double crochet post from the previous row. You will not be working in this next stitch in this row that we're working because I worked that stitch down below. So you're going to be working a double crochet in that next stitch, a front post double crochet around the next stitch. So I'm working a double crochet up here, I'm skipping this double crochet down here, and I'm working my front post double crochet around that next double crochet post from the previous row. Come back up to this row that I'm working here, and I'm going to be skipping that next stitch because I worked it down here instead, and place a double crochet in that next stitch. Front post double crochet around the next stitch, which would be down here in my first row. Come back up to my main row and work a double crochet. And I'm just repeating that stitch sequence all the way down this row. Front post double crochet in the next stitch, front post double crochet, and double crochet. So what you basically have is, and see how it wants to crunch up just a little bit because it is crunching that stitch because we're coming down and working that double crochet in that previous row. But you will have a double crochet in between each of your front post double crochets down here, and you will have a double crochet in here between your front post double crochet. So that's a good way to know and tell whether you're working your stitch correctly. So just continue that same stitch sequence through the end of this row. So when we get to the end of that row and we've worked that final front post double crochet, we're going to have one stitch left, and we're going to work a double crochet in that final stitch. We're going to turn for row 4, and we're going to repeat row 2, which is a row of single crochets. So chain 1, single crochet in the same stitch, single crochet in each of the remaining stitches for this row. At the end of row 4, doing a row of single crochets, we're going to turn for row 5 and chain 2, double crochet in that same stitch, the base of that chain 2, double crochet in the next stitch, and now work a front post double crochet, skipping that row of single crochets, working down into that row of double crochets from the previous row, and I'm going to be working that front post double crochet around that next stitch, and that stitch is going to be sitting in between a front post double crochet on both sides. So come down and work your front post double crochet around that stitch, come back up to your row and work a double crochet in the next stitch, front post double crochet in the next. And again, I'm just repeating that sequence, placing that front post double crochet around that stitch from the previous row, which is working in between front post, my first row of front post double crochets, which is giving it that great texture. So continue on with that stitch sequence for the remainder of this row. All right, so with 2 stitches left, I've worked my final front post double crochet, and I'm going to place a double crochet in the last 2 stitches of this row. All right, you can see how this is starting to work up now, very textured. And now we're just going to be repeating another row of single crochets for row 6 by chaining 1 and working that single crochet in every stitch. And I'm just going to be repeating those same rows again. So I'm going to go back and repeat row 3 after this one, row 4, 5, and 6. And I'm just going to be repeating that sequence of rows to my desired size. So just continue on repeating. And I will work some rows and come back and show you how this looks. All right, so you can see here I've worked quite a few rows in the stitch, and look at how that's working up. That texture is just gorgeous. This stitch would look great in blankets, scarves, cowls, hats. I mean, there's just so many uses for this gorgeous textured stitch. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial today. Thanks so much for being with me. As always, remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel so you never miss a new video. Make sure and follow me on social media so that you get notified whenever I post a new pattern. You can also find the link to my head wrap down in the description of this video if you are interested in heading on over to that pattern as well. So thanks again, everyone. I will see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.